Mexico is a country heavily depends on agriculture for income, and climate change is affecting the country's major income industry. Climate change makes the food and crops hard to grow. The top three environmental issues causing climate change in Mexico are air pollution, lack of clean water, and deforestation. By 2030, climate change would lead to a 40 to 70% decline in Mexico's cropland suitability. In 2012, Mexico became the first developed country to release a new plan in tackling climate change. Mexico's determined intended nationally determined contribution commits the country to reduce its greenhouse gas emission 22% and its black carbon 51% by 2030, relative to business as usual levels. In order to avoid the worst impacts from climate change, developed countries had to set their emission peak year sometime before 2020, and for undeveloped countries can set their peak year after 2020, so that we could accomplish the global warming limit to 2 degrees Celsius. Mexico has set its peak year for greenhouse gas emission in 2026 to achieve its 22% reduction target, with a long-term goal of having emissions by 2050 relative to the 2000 levels. With international support, Mexico says it could reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 36% and black carbon 70% by 2030. Intended nationally determined contributions window is set between 2013 to 2030. Mexico had to cut down emissions by 22% by 2030 unconditionally due to the Paris Agreement. Mexico plans on reducing greenhouse gas 36% and black carbon 70% by 2030. Mexico has also pledged to reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 22% to 36% by 2030 as part of its national determined contribution to the Paris Agreement. Mexico was the first country to include a comprehensive adaptation component in its INDC. They plan on reducing by 50% the numbers of towns considered most vulnerable to climate impact, and preventing new cities from entering this category, cutting deforestation rates to zero by 2030, protecting strategic infrastructure while improving systems like agriculture and the economy. Mexico has also committed to reduce deforestation to zero by 2030 at the Paris Climate Conference in 2015. Mexico committed to restore 150 millions of trees by 2020 and 350 millions by 2030. While more land is being restored, it could have a positive impact on agriculture. On September 21st in 2019, thousands of citizens marched in the streets of Mexico City, demanding actions from the government in order to fight against climate change. Across the nation, there were also protesters protesting in Monterrey, Guadalajara, Merida, and several other Mexican cities. In Mexico, 30,000 people are killed by air pollution annually. Mexico is also the 10th biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. Electricity, transportation, and industry are responsible for 64% of the greenhouse gas emissions. By reducing greenhouse gas emission 31% by 2030, it could prevent 25,000 deaths from air pollution. In conclusion, Mexico has an exciting plan for fighting against climate change, and the government is showing the world what it needs to be done in order to make an impact. However, the country is already on track to miss some goals by a wide margin and has not specified any plan to achieve its emission goals. But they have made big goals for them to accomplish, and hopefully by 2030, we will hear good news from the Mexican government.